A scheming stepmother or a strong and effective ruler? History's view of the pharaoh Hatshepsut changed over time. Hatshepsut, the sixth pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, one of the few, and by far the most successful, women to rule Egypt as pharaoh. Evidence of her remarkable reign, circa 1479 to 1458 BC, did not begin to emerge until the 19th century. But by Winlock's day, historians had crafted the few known facts of her life into a soap opera of deceit, lust and revenge. Although her long rule had been a time of peace and prosperity, filled with magnificent art and a number of ambitious building projects, the greatest of which was her mortuary, or memorial, temple at Deir el-Bahri, Hatshepsut's methods of acquiring and holding onto power suggested a darker side to her reign and character. The widowed queen of the pharaoh Thutmose II, she had, according to custom, been made regent after his death in circa 1479 BC to rule for her young stepson, Thutmose III, until he came of age. Within a few years, however, she proclaimed herself pharaoh, thereby becoming, in the words of Winlock's colleague at the Metropolitan, William C. Hayes, the vilest type of usurper. Disconcerting to some scholars, too, was her insistence on being portrayed as male, with bulging muscles and the traditional pharaonic false beard, variously interpreted by those historians as an act of outrageous deception, deviant behavior, or both. Many early Egyptologists also concluded that Hatshepsut's chief minister, Senenmut, must have been her lover as well, a co-conspirator in her climb to power, the so-called evil genius behind what they viewed as her devious politics. Upon Hatshepsut's death in circa 1458 BC, her stepson, then likely still in his early 20s, finally ascended to the throne. By that time, according to Hayes, Thutmose III had developed a loathing for Hatshepsut, her name and her very memory which practically beggars description. The destruction of her monuments, carried out with such apparent fury, was almost universally interpreted as an act of long-awaited and bitter revenge on the part of Thutmose III, who, Winlock wrote, could scarcely wait to take the vengeance on her dead that he had not dared in life. Hatshepsut was born at the dawn of a glorious age of Egyptian imperial power and prosperity, rightly called the New Kingdom. Her father, King Thutmose I, was a charismatic leader of legendary military exploits. Hatshepsut, scholars surmise, may have come into the world about the time of his coronation, circa 1504 BC, and so would still have been a toddler when he famously sailed home to Thebes with the naked body of a Nubian chieftain dangling from the prow of his ship, a warning to all who would threaten his empire. Hatshepsut seems to have idolized her father. She would eventually have him reburied in the tomb she was having built for herself, and would claim that soon after her birth he had named her successor to his throne, an act that scholars feel would have been highly unlikely. There had been only 2, possibly 3, female pharaohs in the previous 1,500 years, and each had ascended to the throne only when there was no suitable male successor available. Cleopatra would rule some 14 centuries later. Normally, the pharaonic line passed from father to son, preferably the son of the queen, but if there were no such offspring, to the son of one of the pharaoh's secondary, or harem, wives. In addition to Hatshepsut, and another younger daughter who apparently died in childhood, it's believed that Thutmose I fathered 2 sons with queen armies, both of whom predeceased him. Thus the son of a secondary wife, Mutnefret, was crowned Thutmose II. In short order, and probably to bolster the royal bloodlines of this harem child, young Thutmose II was married to his half-sister Hatshepsut, making her queen of Egypt at about age 12. To Egyptologists of an earlier generation, Hatshepsut's elevation to godlike status was an act of naked ambition. It was not long, Hayes wrote, before this vain, ambitious, and unscrupulous woman showed her true colors. But more recent scholarship suggests that a political crisis, such as a threat from a competing branch of the royal family, obliged Hatshepsut to become pharaoh. Far from stealing the throne, says Catherine Rohrig, curator of Egyptian art at the Metropolitan Museum in New York City, Hatshepsut may have had to declare herself king to protect the kingship for her stepson. Hatshepsut probably knew her position was tenuous, both by virtue of her sex and the unconventional way she had gained the throne, and therefore appears to have done what canny leaders have often done in times of crisis: she reinvented herself. The most obvious form this took was having herself portrayed as a male pharaoh. As to why, no one really knows, says Dorman. But he believes it may have been motivated by the presence of a male co-ruler, a circumstance with which no previous female ruler had ever contended. She was not pretending to be a man. She was not cross-dressing. Kathleen Keller, a professor of Near Eastern Studies at the University of California at Berkeley, told me before her death last year. Inscriptions on Hatshepsut's statues, she said, almost always contain some indication of her true gender, a title, such as daughter of Re, or feminine word endings, resulting in such grammatical conundrums as his. One important way pharaohs affirmed Mat was by creating monuments, and Hatshepsut's building projects were among the most ambitious of any pharaohs. She began with the erection of 2 100-foot-tall obelisks at the Great Temple Complex at Karnak. Reliefs commemorating the event show the obelisks, each weighing about 450 tons, being towed along the Nile by 27 ships manned by 850 horsemen. Hatshepsut's own tomb was cut into the base of the cliffs on the east side of the Valley of the Kings and was large enough to accommodate both her sarcophagus and that of her father. Reburying him in her tomb was yet another attempt to legitimize her rule. It's believed that Hatshepsut died, possibly in her late 40s, around 1458 BC, the year that Thutmose III first used the title ruler of Mat. Thutmose III's destruction of Hatshepsut's monuments has long been recognized as a conscientious, and very nearly successful, attempt to obliterate her name and memory from history. But was it, as many early Egyptologists had assumed, an act of revenge and hatred? While numerous theories abound, most contemporary Egyptologists agree that the effort to delete Hatshepsut's rule had something to do with Thutmose III's concerns about the succession of power after his death. Was there some threat to the legitimacy of his own son, Amenhotep II, who in fact did succeed him? Possibly. But Dorman believes that Hatshepsut's unconventional reign may have been too successful, a dangerous precedent best erased, he suggests, to prevent the possibility of another powerful female ever inserting herself into the long line of Egyptian male kings. Toward the end of her reign, Hatshepsut erected a second pair of obelisks at Karnak. On one the inscription reads, "Now my heart turns this way and that, as I think what the people will say, those who shall see my monuments in years to come, and who shall speak of what I have done." Thank you for watching. Your support is appreciated. Until next time with a new video.